Hello, everybody. Rob Prince here, and this is another video discussion between myself and Ibrahim Kazerouni. We've had a number of these. Ibrahim Kazerouni is a Shiite imam living in the Detroit area, a graduate of the University of Denver's Korbel School of International Studies and the Iliff School of Theology. It was a joint PhD program. He originates from Iraq. And has had a very rich life up until now, and I hope it continues to be that way. Myself, Rob Prince, I'm a retired senior lecturer of international studies at the Korbel School of the same school where Ibrahim was at University of Denver, spent a quarter of a century there. And Ibrahim and I were for 13 years political commentators on a monthly program which is referred to as Hemispheres Middle East Dialogue, which was put together by by Jim Nelson. Tonight, things are moving so fast in the Middle East; it's hard to keep up with it. We've entitled this particular program "Netanyahu's Slippery Slope to the Abyss." And hopefully he won't take the rest of us with him. So in terms of a very brief introduction with our need to get into the subject matter as quickly as we can, in the last 6 months, there have been two dates that really have, they've changed everything in the Middle East. The first was October 7th, the breakout from Gaza, the military operation of the Gazan Palestinians. And the second was more recently, a week ago, on April 13th, when Iran launched a broad missile attack against Israel in retaliation for Israel's bombing of the Iranian Consulate in Damascus. And two complementary historical events that really changed the shape of the region. So with this in mind, I have to add that nobody really imagined that the situation in Gaza would escalate to the degree that it has and to the dangerous level that it has. But here we are. So Ibrahim, let's start right off here. How did April 13th change everything?
Well, good evening to you, Rob, and good evening to our listeners. As you indicated, the incident of April 13th or April 14th, which had with the October 7th, they both had monumental, or if not for the Israelis, catastrophic kind of consequences. It was in response to the attack, unprovoked attack by the Israelis against Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria, against international law and Vienna Convention that embassies of countries are considered to be part of their territory. So any attack on embassy will be thought of as attack against the land itself or the territory itself.
And that is a well-acknowledged aspect of international law. It's not something.
The Vienna Convention about the protection of the diplomatic establishment. And 2 days ago, David Cameron, the British Foreign Secretary, was interviewed, and he was challenged about this. Is this an international law or respected? And he was quite clear that this is part of the international law, and countries are expected to honor that kind of protection. So when that happened, particularly when that attack led to the loss of life, a number of Iranian military personnel within the building, Iran indicated that it's going to retaliate. Nobody knew how and when, but Iranian government took its time to identify exactly where these planes that attacked the embassy they flew off from. Once it was identified, they informed their friendly states in the region like Oman and others that they intend to retaliate. And they naturally passed it through Swiss embassy and others to United States. So everybody was aware that Iran is going to retaliate. Nobody anticipated the size of the retaliation, however. A huge number of drones, missiles, ballistic missiles, etc., etc. But despite all the attempts by the Western powers to shoot them down or intercept them, major weapons or major missiles targeted for these military air base managed to get through and hit their target. So it has changed. One could analyze since April 14th, the media is full of analysis.
Yes. Yes. Ibrahim, I want to put a question to you right here. Israel and the United States is claiming that their response to this missile attack was a great success. I'm not so sure that that's the case. What do you think?
Well, that's natural, Rob. That's natural to demean everything about Iranians, whether it's technological development or anything else, that they said they shot down 99.999% of the weapons. But all the analysis and even pictures that are coming out of Israeli press themselves clearly indicate otherwise. But that was the whole issue when you analyze it. We are fortunate at the moment that we have a number of military minds analyzing the situation from purely military point of view.
Yes.
They say this was probably the most sophisticated plan put together by the way it was approached. You will send in the very slow, noisy drones to be fired at and to drain the anti-aircraft missiles that exist. And
announced on Iranian television, right?
Yes.
It was such a public event. It's like, this is not how ordinarily war takes place. And my sense of this is the Iranians were literally warning the Israelis and the United States and others, we're starting this. And so
yes,
helping them prepare for it.
Not only before even this, before the actual event itself and the final green light, 6 or 7 days before it, the Iranians began informing the Swiss embassy, the Omanis and others that this is imminent, is going to happen.
Right.
So they gave plenty of warning to the other side to remove, and they made it clear that they are not going to attack civilian bases. It's primarily on a military issue.
And they did they? There were no, I mean, there were no, what I read, even from the American media and the Israeli media, they talked about a Bedouin girl. They didn't say she was killed, but that she was wounded. So, I mean, for the number of missiles that were sent, this is virtually a civilianless bombing.
Yes, that was what the Iranians said, and they honored it, that they are not going to attack any civilian bases, and it was only purely for military bases. Which leads us to think about what will happen if, God forbid, this tit for tat goes out of control, and Iranians have to respond massively, as they have already said, without warning.
Right.
I don't think the Israelis would be able to contain or intercept these huge numbers that they are going to send, and that will be disastrous for the Israelis. But for the Americans, what clearly indicated that this is a theme we have discussed, Rob, many times,
yes.
that the Americans are no longer able to influence the event. They tried their best to prevent, or at least to discourage Iran from the attack. It didn't. They did not agree with it. They said, if you don't want to be hit, stay out. They finally thought that, well, if this is imminent, then at least don't attack American bases. I mean, just imagine United States pleading to Iran, please don't attack American bases. And they said, yeah, we're going to stay away from it as long as you stay away from it.
I read one report that there was a meeting in Oman at which the CIA director, William Burns, attended, and either there was some representative from the Iranian government, or this was being relayed to the Omanis, to the Iranians, and there was actual discussions in which they were kind of talking about what would be the general framework, and the United States was pressing, don't do this. And Iran is saying, well, we're going to do it. And then Burns says, again, according to this one person who, Pepe Escobar is who I heard it from, this Brazilian columnist, that what Burns said was that if there are not civilian casualties, that U.S. would use its influence and pressure for Israel not to respond, or something to that effect.
Yeah,
did that meeting happen from what you know?
What we have, as far as the reports in the Middle Eastern papers, come under the general umbrella of communication between Iran, United States, through third parties.
Okay.
And, the third parties are Swiss Embassy, which is the official representative of the United States in Iran, U.S. interest. Naturally, any report or any plan or any warning would go through them. That's the diplomatic channel. And also through the Omanis and few others that in the region that they have been negotiating and working with as a go-between between U.S. and Iran. So they would have known about it and they would have passed. If there is such a meeting, I don't think Iranian would have attended it, but the demand or the question or whatever would have passed through Omanis to the Iranian government, and they would have received it. But the general idea was, as long as United States stays out of it, we will not attack American bases. But if United States takes any step to retaliate on behalf of the Israelis, then this underlined it, the Iranian, all the American bases in the region will become soft targets.
Okay, and it's funny how these bases have changed from kind of offensive series of weapons that could do terrible things to targets.
Now if you remember, Rob, we were discussing this about 5 or 6 years ago.
Yes.
And we thought that the presence of these bases around Iran, they act like a noose against the Iranian neck, around the Iranian neck. And the Iranians have been clever in a sense of turning this around to the detriment of United States. Now, the presence of these bases are nothing but soft targets for the Iranians to attack, which debilitates U.S. activity in the region, because they are worried about the Iranian response against all of these targets in the region.
Yeah, and a couple more points on this, or questions for you. So when I look at this attack, the Iranian missile response, on the one hand, it was massive in the sense of the number of missiles that were fired. And the ones that they really wanted to hit their target did at the military bases in the south of Israel. But what I conclude from looking at this is that this was more a symbolic show of force rather than a literal military action meant, one side against another in terms of war. It's Iran basically giving Israel and the United States and their alliances, NATO, whatever, a taste of, this is what we've got. This is a part of what we've got, and we're serious. Is that a fair estimate in your part?
Yes, Rob. This is an analysis that Scott Ritter has given a number of interviews during the past, and he has looked at this event particularly from a military mind and as a military analyst. And he said that this is such a unique event that not only in times of in time of giving warning and everything else, clearly this is a warning to the Americans and to the Western powers that they have supported Israelis, that this is only a small amount. He said that when we look at the caliber of these drones, they were noisy, slow, primarily sent right at the beginning to draw fire, to literally to be shut down.
So why would they do that? I mean,
because they exhaust the anti-aircraft system
right.
that exists, and quickly they would run out of all these missiles that are supposed to be used to defend. And once these are drawn, the sky is really open for the much more stronger punches to take place, and the ballistic missiles and everything else that came and hit the target that they had in mind.
Okay, and then I guess the big political question has to do with the whole issue of deterrence. Both Israel's need for deterrence on the one hand, and the Iranian projection of their own deterrence here. Do you see that a factor in this exchange, this military exchange, or this missile exchange?
Yeah, I mean, what happened during this from 7th of October and the 14th or 13th of April, it clearly indicated that Israelis, without the United States, without the Western powers, cannot defend themselves. They have to rely on the Western power. Even when the Secretary of State for Defense in a couple of days ago said that Israel has to trust in the United States and follow at least the advice given, clearly it was making reference to the fact that, look, without United States, without the British, without the French, without possibly the Germans, you really cannot defend yourself. We have to provide you with that defense mechanism. So that is another consequence which hurt the image and totally changed the image of the Israelis within not only Middle East, but around the world, that where they were trying to project as a very strong fourth army in the world. We are capable of doing everything. And one event on the 7th of October, another event on 13th of April, punched a gaping hole through this image and proved that Israelis cannot do much.
Yes, the invincible Israeli army turns out to be not so invincible, and besides making it clear to the people in the region, if you like, that Israel is vulnerable militarily. There's something else that both of these strikes indicate to me, and it's this: what Israel has always claimed is that it could defend its own population against threats from the outside. And now, in 6 months, that notion has just been it's shattered from what I can tell. And when we think about that, what does that do to the Israeli population itself? It has created a panic among Israelis, and one of the really key elements of what Israel claims to be. This is going to be the homeland, as they say it, for the Jewish people, the safe place for the Jewish people. And now what we see is it's not safe. It never was safe for the Palestinians and other Arab countries that were neighboring, and it's not safe for Israelis anymore. And what I'm reading, they're leaving in large numbers.
Yes, I mean, you can go to the airport, and the images that are coming out of Ben Gurion's airport and other airports, and across the border from northern Egypt going to these two countries, clearly indicate that panic has already started, and the possibility people are beginning to doubt the premise of a safe land for the Jews that fictitiously was created by the Zionist movement. Not only that, we see this even in the northern territory, in south of Lebanon. a kind of land, a buffer zone has been created cleverly by the Hezbollah, and nearly between some estimates say 80, other people say 160, and other people
I've
say
seen those different numbers.
Yes, people have already left from that area, and they are not prepared to go back because they consider that to be unsafe.
So we've got two populations of Israelis that have been forced to leave their homes. One is that what you were just discussing, those in the northern area by the Lebanese border, but also those that were near Gaza, the settlements that were near Gaza. Those people have had to leave too. And the numbers that I have seen of displaced Israelis, I've seen different figures, so I don't know which. I've seen everything from about 150,000 to 300,000-400,000 Israelis. That puts a terrible amount of pressure on the Israeli government, doesn't it?
Yes, I mean, not only housing, you have to provide them with job, you have to provide them with social security, which drains the economy, particularly when you have other expenses such as other crises, economic crisis, withdrawal of what we call investment in Israel. That recently there was an article by a Turkish author analyzing the economic consequence of these two, the 7th of October as well as the 13th. Whatever was left of the 7th of October, 13th of April came to even destroy it further. So the consequence for the Israeli economy is going to be tremendous. Other countries are not prepared to invest in Israel, etc., etc. So this is, on a short term, it may not show it, but certainly on the medium to longer term, is going to have disastrous consequence.
All right, I've got one more question to you about these kind of initial comments. You looking at these two events, that of October 7th and that of April 13th or 14th, whichever day it was. Israel doesn't look all that good militarily. And what we're seeing is the anti-missile defense, really, there's holes in it. And that from a conventional point of view, it looks like Israel is meeting its match militarily if you combine all of the efforts of the axis of resistance along with what the Iranians are doing. Israel is more and more looking like a kind of wounded beast, and wounded beasts can do very disturbing, scary things. And I think you know what I'm alluding to. My concern is that unable to really challenge these adversaries in a conventional warfare, how serious is, my friends keep saying, are we headed for World War III? Will Israel use its unstated but well-known nuclear weapons? Is that just crazy talk as far as you're concerned? Or are we dealing with something that we have to address at this point?
No, far from it, Rob. It's a serious concern, because in 1973, when the military Israeli military tactics failed, and the Egyptians and others overwhelmed the Israelis, and the losses became very high for the Israelis, Golda Meir actually threatened at that time that we have a third option, and that is the nuclear. So when is the threshold where the Israeli madman such as Netanyahu is going to switch, or the wounded beast is going to switch, or think of what an alternative strategy? We don't know. But I don't think United States, France, and the United Kingdom would allow it. But the problem is Netanyahu doesn't listen to anyone. There is always that possibility that they might go nuclear. The problem is that if they did go nuclear and they attack, say, let's for the sake of argument, Iran with a nuclear weapon, then Iran would have a justification to really unleash a biblical catastrophe on Israelis, which is going to be the end of it. And I don't think Israelis, at least at this stage, are prepared to go that route, which it means what Golda Meir said, that if we are going to sink, we will take everybody else with us.
Right. That was what I was going to ask you about. That well, we'll just take everyone with us if we can't win. And it's actually it's not out of the cards. It's a worst case scenario, but it's another argument for a ceasefire and beginning to stop the escalation that's taking place. Well, look, Ibrahim, we're doing this a little bit differently than we had prepared to do, but I think we covered, some good ground here. But why don't we turn to what the United States is up to, or what it's not up to, and maybe I'll make a couple of comments about that, and then ask you. When I look at, you've already described this. The situation, kind of the very concrete situation between the United States and Iran. The United States says, don't respond to the Israeli attack. Iran says, we're not going to take your advice or your pressure or whatever. And not only that, if you intervene, we're going to hit your bases. And the United States understands that this is the Iranians are serious, that they're not playing games. And I find it interesting that at least at this moment, it appears that Washington is trying to slow this escalation down for its own reasons. The other point I would like to make is, when I look at what the U.S. is up to now, in terms of its ability, its hegemonic influence in the region, it's completely lost. It seems to not have a clue as to how to respond, how to diffuse the situation. No one's listening to it anymore. The Israelis, Netanyahu seems to be quite resistant, and of course, why should the Iranians listen to the United States after so many years of being bullied and attacked, and attempt for the regime to be overthrown? So the United States is in a real pickle.
The event in Syria and the attack on Iranian embassy, I believe, from what I have read and I understand, it's the straw that broke the camel's back and forced the Iranian to transition from what they called strategic patience, into what we call a strategic attack or a strategic response. And that transition took place, that enough is enough. And since the Americans have not been able to contain the Israelis and prevent them from taking these military random and military action against international law as they are, why should the Iranians take heed of the Americans' concern? That's number one. And number two, for the Iranians, they have already established that United States, the old United States is no longer there. It's a paper tiger for them, that they don't care about what United States does or doesn't do, threatens or doesn't do, because they know when the push comes to shove, United States has no other alternative but to listen to the Iranians and at least stay out of the whole dynamics. So this is the change for the United States, and what the Western analysts consider to be extremely disconcerting for the Western image, because United States is no longer able to function or at least to control the events.
Right. Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that United States is not going to continue doing certain things. Even
that it's powerless. Yes.
Yeah. Undermine Iranian government or try to destabilize Iranian government on behalf of Israelis and others. These kind of divide and conquer or undermining of, which has been happening for 45 years in Iran. Iran has developed a thick, what we call Teflon skin when it comes to anything that United States is throwing or West is throwing at it. And immediately, what happened today? Immediately, Iranians approached the Russians and the Chinese for acquiring a new, much more sophisticated anti-aircraft and technology that even further develops their attempt to protect their sites. So United States is nowhere to be seen.
The decline. All right. So of course, the United States remains a player and a powerful country, although its influence is receding. But what gets me is how quickly U.S. prestige has evaporated over the past 4 or 5. It's hard to believe that it could happen so quickly and so radically. Do you agree? And if so, how do you explain this?
Well, Ibn Khaldun, in his book Al-Muqaddama, in the 12th and 13th century, wrote about this, that what
rise and fall of civilizations.
Yes, the rise and fall of great powers. United States now has reached the slippery slope of the descent, while all its opponent in the ascending powers. It may not show to us very quickly what is happening, but certainly within a short period of time, accumulation and compounding effect of what is happening and for the United States becomes much, much clearer. It doesn't mean that 6 years ago when we were discussing, or 10 years ago when we were discussing the reduction in the influence of the United States, it wasn't there. It was there. But gradually over time, it becomes more and more clear. Now the turn of event in the Middle East has made it even crystal clear that U.S. has no power to influence anything within the region, and the region is left to itself within its own dynamic. Now, zero-sum game comes to have powerful effect in the relationship of the two major factors, Israelis and the Iranians. And that is something that we have to be mindful and see how it's going to happen. As a consequence of this attack, now Arab countries that up to, say, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, they had no even respect for the Iranians. They would refer to them in some kind of sectarian religious terms. Now they are offering their foreign ministers to go and meet Iranian foreign minister at the United Nations and others, extending what we call the olive oil, the olive branch. Well, we have to start good relationship with the Iranians.
I meant, but of course, when I start these interviews, I get the subject matter takes over. But behind me, and I know you can't see it real clearly.
Yeah, I know the picture.
But you know what that picture is, and in looking at the most recent U.S. vote in the Security Council, where the United States vetoed the attempt of the Security Council for Palestine to be considered a nation that's a part of the UN. And what struck me is how isolated that the United States is at the United Nations itself and these other votes that it vetoed. But also, this is what we're seeing in the region and the world. I don't remember, not since the war in Vietnam, and even then, I don't remember the United States being as isolated on a foreign policy issue as they are today on the question of Gaza and on the question of Palestine. Is that?
I agree. It's a fair assessment, and we see the ramification of it in the world global press, say Indian press or Far Eastern press, Russian press or Japanese press, or even South American press. They all say the same thing. African press, they all say about the same thing, that not to the consequence of the event of 7th of October exposed this gaping hole of the double standard that exists in the West. And this double standard led to the fact that the world is now looking at United States and the Israelis not in the same way that they used to look at them in the past. And naturally, United States feels isolated, whether it's at the United Nations or General Assembly or anywhere else.
All right, my friend, we have gone on for a little bit more than half an hour, but I do want to, before we wind up, there's the big question, what now? And I'm wondering if you can sketch out, where's the hope here? That's what I hear from so many of my friends who are calling me and emailing me. Where's the hope? And where's the hope, and what are the dangers? How do we bring back from the edge of the abyss here this situation? How do you see things playing out if you can see them playing out in this period ahead?
Well, Rob, in the greater scheme of things, I think we really need to understand, if you want peace in the region, at least the two-state solution must come back to the table. And Israelis have to accept the reality and withdraw their settlements from West Bank and Gaza and allow the Palestinians some reasonable statehood for them. That is the only overall umbrella. Whether that is going to happen in the short to medium term, I doubt it. With the American veto constantly, God knows how many 20th, 30th veto in favor of the Israelis. I'm not sure. But on the short term, at the moment, the only war in the history of Israelis that have gone close to 7 months.
Right.
And they have not been able to crack it and to secure a victory. Not only that, they have suffered constantly again and again as a consequence. This war in Gaza, despite everything, has to come to an end. The genocide has to stop, and a meaningful negotiation to take place for an exchange of prisoners and for withdrawal of the Israelis from Gaza. That is number one, first step, immediately. Humanitarian factors, as we have talked about repeatedly, should be number one concern at the moment. The war has to stop, and the Gaza issue has to be addressed. Whether that by itself would lead to any other rapprochement and lead to the issue of statehood or some kind of resolution of the crisis between the Palestinians and Israelis, United States and Western powers must understand that without resolving this issue, Middle East would constantly boil and bleed, and they will suffer the consequences. If you want to add anything, Rob.
The only thing that I want to add, watching these just horrific events over the past 7 months, and of course they weren't much better earlier than that, is in the question that I ask myself is, can Israel change? A society that's a settler colonial society. People talk about themselves being, quote, the chosen people. In and of itself, if you really get down to it, if you're chosen and others aren't, that's a rather polite way of saying racism. And so, my question, and I don't know the answer, is can Israel de-Zionize? Can Israel find a way to live with its Palestinian neighbors who now it has its boot on their neck, in a democratic way? And what I'm seeing, I'm not sure that we're going in that direction. I've mentioned before, I think on our programs, my one of my points of reference for looking at the whole Israeli-Palestinian experience is Algeria. And I look at the fate of the French colonial elements in Algeria. And they had that option too. They had that option of give up your privileges, become more democratic, and live side to side with your Algerian brothers. They couldn't do it. And the whole project collapsed. And I'm afraid, well, my concern is the same thing could happen here. So
there are three fundamental.
I would like to see a resolution that would be humane for everybody. But I don't. Right now, we seem so far from it. I don't see. I just don't see.
There are three fundamental themes that literally shackles the Israeli mindset, political mindset, and military mindset. And until that is cracked, I totally agree with you. The only consequence of this intransigent will be the collapse of the whole project. Number one, the chosen race and concept. Yes. We are the number one, and we are God-given. Although that was challenged in recent Vatican meeting by the bishops in Vatican, that they were told the Israeli government not to use Bible because in support of political issues. So that's number one, that we are the chosen race. Number two, the second theme is that they claim after Holocaust there are no moralities. There is nothing moral for them to adhere to. And number three, which is the critical factor, the Palestinians are not human beings.
Right. Yes.
Combination of these three create a lethal mindset that the options available, either they continue with the same massacre and genocide, and they are not prepared to come down the tree, and ultimately is going to end the project, as all colonial powers, whether the British, the French, the Germans, the Spanish, and others, had to collapse and implode from within.
Okay, well, my friend, you have any last thoughts at this point, or shall we just call it an evening?
I think the situation is so fluid that we can't
make
a prediction beyond a couple of days, because nobody knows what's going to happen.
It's really incredible every day.
And we have to follow it up, say, soon by another program.
We will.
Reflects on what happens between now and then.
Right. I think we're back to a kind of a monthly schedule, and we'll keep to it, friends and listeners.
Or so possibly every other week.
A very good evening, and we'll
thank you very much.
And goodbye to everybody else. Good night.
Bye-bye.
All right, let's see how I can get out of here now. Where did it go? Oh, here we go. No, all right.